Welcome. Welcome, dear participants. It's beautiful to have you with us on the fourth day of the Martin-Roth-Symposium. Today, we're talking about museums and architecture, and we are happy to have Bice Curiger with us, Artistic Director, Fondation Vincent van Gogh, whose print you already saw, and Bill Sherman, Director of Warburg Institute and Professor of Cultural History at the University of London, is also with us. He will be our first responder for this deep dive. My name is Fabian, and I will guide you through the deep dives today. It's a pleasure to have you with us, and I would like to explain to the audience how you can actually participate in this deep dive session, because this is the time to ask your question, and there are 3 ways to include them in this discussion. The first one is via direct audio in this webinar, so please click on the raise your hand icon, which you can find in the menu bar at the bottom of your screen. As soon as it is your turn, I will call you by name and enable your audio. Please unmute yourself so you can ask your question. As soon as you have asked it, we will turn off your audio again, and your video will never be used. If you prefer, you can also ask the question in writing in the chat of this webinar, or you use our online form at campus.re-publica.com, campus.re-publica.com, if you are following from a website or through YouTube, and we can include those questions as well. So if you have a question, please feel free to send them already, and we have little time, so I would ask Bill to give first insights and a first reaction to Bice's sprint.
Thank you, really happy to do it, and Bice, so happy we could be here together to pick up this conversation that we started thanks to Martin-Roth 3-4 years ago now. As you said, Martin, you met in Venice, and we met in Venice because we worked together on the pavilion co-curated by the V&A, where I was working then, and the Venice Biennale. You were brought in, of course, to curate that 2017 pavilion, and you brought the amazing Jorge Pardo to us, who strikes me as such a perfect example of what you were talking about in your sprint earlier. An artist really who is as much an architect as an artist, who thinks of the two as inextricably linked. And I think he's probably the first person who I think of now after Martin when I listen to your sprint. Let me just offer a couple of quick thoughts before we hand over to the audience and see if we can pick up some of these many issues you raised. There were so many different topics. The first thing is just to go back to this pavilion that you curated in 2017 in Venice with Jorge. We thought, as you remember, about doing a summer school together, which never happened, which I still think we should do, unfinished business. And it was about the relationship between museum, biennale, house, and shop, and the idea of displaying similar collections in those different spaces. How they mean differently and how those spaces inform the display and interpretation of work. I think that was a really nice example. And again, as I say, something that we should pick up. But what strikes me now in retrospect, and as I think about the ideas you just shared with us a minute ago, I think it's interesting to think about how different spaces shape the work we do and the thoughts we do. And it's very unusual, I think, for someone to have such a broad career as you've had in working in spaces, of course, museum, but also biennale and also magazine. And in a way, I wonder, each of those is a kind of architecture. It has its own architecture. And architects, of course, have to build many different kinds of buildings. But we in the museum world tend to work with a fairly narrow, as you said, the white box archetypally, in a fairly narrow set of spaces. And I think you've really broken out of those spaces in the different contexts in which you have curated. So it would be very interesting to hear if you curate architecturally differently in those different contexts. The last thing I just want to say before maybe asking the audience for their questions is that when you talked about that idea of breaking beyond the white cube, and in particular of an expanded art history that you're eager to explore, the person, of course, who I thought about was another mutual friend, A.B. Warburg. And A.B. Warburg, of course, I think about partly because I'm director of the institute that carries his name and holds all of his material, but also because I've just returned from Berlin, where we have just opened a collaborative exhibition with Haus der Kultur in der Welt, HKW, curated by Roberto Ort and Axel Heil, which reconstructs A.B. Warburg's most infamous project for the first time since 1929, his famous Bilder Atlas, this incredible breaking of a linear style-based art history. And I think those projects in those contexts really made me think, because Warburg is maybe the quintessential or even the foundational instance of someone who is trying to work across this expanded art history. But there are two other aspects maybe that we think about here. The first that are relevant to the symposium and to the issues that everybody is raising. The first is global, the need to move beyond single cultures. And I think your examples of the engagements, let's say bringing in Sun Ra to a Van Gogh exhibition, amazing, really, really great. But again, A.B. Warburg's interests were very much in that area. But the HKW exhibition, which I hope you will see, and I hope everybody else will be able to see, despite the problems with travel at the moment, what's so interesting about it is its shape in some ways. And it's really what surprised me. Even though those materials were from my own institution, I was shocked to see them arrayed in these beautiful curves, and the architectural display of these visual panels and the visual information really made me realize that Warburg is an architectural thinker as much as a nonlinear art historian. And so I was thinking, this building that he built to house them in Hamburg, where he had this beautiful oval-shaped or elliptical reading room. This reading room that he built in the Kulturwissenschaftliche Bibliothek in Hamburg is quite an extraordinary shape. And it made me think, what does the shape of the building have to do with the work that the eye or the mind does in encountering the work of art? So these were my initial thoughts about your really rich presentation. But mostly, I just wanted to say thank you for coming and sharing your experiences with us. And so nice to be back in touch.
Yes, hello, Bill. And thank you for these warm, wonderful memories. And yes, I'm happy to see you here on screen again. And I don't know if I should respond or if we open up to the questions. I might quickly respond to A.B. Warburg, because also, of course, it's so connected to Martin-Roth and to cultural science. And today, I think, especially in this a bit closed universe of the contemporary art world, it's good to open up, I think, to a broader view on cultural studies as they have become discussed anyway a lot in the last decades. And Martin-Roth was a descendant from this famous Tübinger school, which I just want to remind you, Volkskunde was his discipline, the discipline he studied, and the name was changed into Kulturwissenschaft after the war, because it was so loaded, because it had been so ideologized and instrumentalized by the Nazis. And I think this is this point of view to culture that you have to bring in all different other disciplines, psychology, sociology, and politics, to then still have maybe a rather neutral glance on the whole panorama, and then start to work. And I think this is what Martin-Roth, I think, offered to us also from the more defined art museums, to open up and be bold and look at contemporary contemporary culture. Yes, and
can I jump in here just for a little time for a question by the audience, because I think it fits quite well to what you just said. Felix asked through our online tool at campus.republica.com. In the last days, we talked a lot about museums opening up and getting rid of their physical representation. Do you think there is a way for architecture to help in that process?
Sorry, I did acoustically. The architect should help in which process?
And we talked in the last days. We talked a lot about museums eventually having to open up and getting rid of their physical representation. So, can architecture help in that process?
Oh yes, absolutely. And I was very happy to listen to David Chipperfield saying, in a very humble way, you should build less, maybe use more simplicity also, and to come back to Bill's question also to me, asking me about curating architecturally in different spaces. That means also in a magazine space, in the space of a book, as much as in a specific space. But I think what is interesting now is that Corona, the pandemic, has shown that the big museum, the mega museums in mega cities, they are much more dramatically affected by this than the smaller ones in off-center places. And I think maybe this is a moment where the big ones can go and look a bit off center from the small and learn a bit from the small ones, how to also make attractive programs, and not only thinking about big masses and big public and big investments.
Yeah. We have another question coming in by Simone, who is asking, how can architecture help to give space to the unexpected and the surprising?
Yes, I think this is very much related to a very local perception. Every architecture is built on a specific space, and this is if we talk that so many institutions just think about tourists, of course you can become very folkloristic, and this is not what I mean. I think you have to address the public at the space, at the place where you build, but at the same time you have to have the horizon very open, and that is then the surprise you can offer.
Do you have an answer to that as well, Bill?
Yeah, I was actually wanting to jump in there, because one of the things that Martin was so obsessed with is how to get people to look at what is not on view, or what they don't already know and already want to see. And I think this is something that, again, A.B. Warburg's entire library, entire photothek was devoted to, was taking you to something that you don't know. And search engines, of course, much less these great, beautiful structures of museums with their sequential rooms and clear maps, they're really the opposite. They take you to the familiar. And what a good museum, library, website, brain does is it surprises you. It takes you to what you don't know and don't even know how to look for. And I think this is one of the things that Bice has done with a sense of surprise as a curator, but also that a great architect can do even in helping us to get lost. I remember just quickly, the last thing is that the V&A is an extremely notoriously difficult museum to navigate. And while I was there, we went through several unsuccessful attempts to have a new map made for the institution. And at the end, I think everybody felt comfortable with people just getting lost, because wandering sometimes, not knowing your way, is one of the best ways to find your way.
Well, for me, that's a great ending to this deep dive. And thank you so much, Bice, for taking the time to answer the questions by the audience. It was really wonderful to have you with us. It was a very refreshing look. So a warm digital applause to you. And many thanks also to Bill Sherman, our first responder,
Pleasure.
who will leave us at this point as well. And also thanks for the nice invitation to the HKW. Well, me as a Berliner will certainly go now.
Good.
So next up is the deep dive with David Chipperfield and Edwin Heathcote, which will begin in 1 minute on this very channel. And thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you back in 1 minute.